And there it is. Welcome to the show, Nicholas DeSanto. Nicholas, are you kind of are you Nico? Because sometimes I see people say Nico, but I always see it written as Nicholas online.
Officially, I'm Nicholas, but I don't mind Nico at all. Many of my friends call me Nico, so up
Yeah.
to you.
Um,
And thanks for
I
having
mean,
me,
we'll
Tom.
see. Oh yeah, my pleasure. I'm so glad. Andrea found you, and then I started watching your videos online. Where are you? Are you in England?
Yes, I'm in London, England right now. That's where I live.
Yeah, that's great. I've been over there. I mean, I don't work there much, but I did the Edinburgh Festival and popped in and did some clubs in London. Lewis Schaefer is an American that's over there. I don't know if you ever heard of him. You know Lewis?
Yeah, he's a good friend of mine, actually. Sometimes we gig together.
Oh, that's great.
Obviously, he's,
That's great.
he's more advanced and more famous than I am, but I consider him as a very good friend and almost a mentor.
Oh, that's great. Well, he and I came up together working the clubs in New York, and then he moved to England, and I got together. I forget. I was over there shooting a commercial one time. We got together, and since then we kind of keep in touch, and we did a podcast together like this. So I'm
Right.
glad you knew him
Ironically,
because
tonight I'm in. Sorry for interrupting you. I'm in this a TV studio called GB News. It's a British news channel,
yeah,
which we like because it's not woke, and hopefully it will last longer. It has a lot of enemies. And tonight, Louis Schaefer was supposed to be on this show, but for some reason, I hope he's not too ill. It looks like he had a cold or something. So I'm his replacement actually, but we meet quite
wait a
frequently.
minute. Wait a minute. He has a cold. I thought you when you eat steak every day, only meat, you don't get sick.
I mean, that's just my hypothesis because he pulled out of the lineup for this show last minute. And
Uh-huh.
because we were out together with a bunch of friends yesterday, actually, that was quite cold, and the host of the show on which he was on, where he was on, also had a cold. That's just my hypothesis. So I don't want
Yeah.
to diss or undermine his diet. I know he wouldn't be happy with me if I did that.
Yeah.
Just set the
I know.
record straight.
He's quite an evangelist for his way of life. So
Definitely.
let me I'm fiddling with my computer here as we talk because I want to make sure I don't like when it interrupts me, but I don't know how to do the do not disturb thing. You know what I'm talking about when the thing comes in and it's like
Yeah, all those alerts and
focus.
notifications, right?
Focus. I'm going to click it. There we go. Okay, so I watched some of your videos and I was having a great time, and I kind of queued a few of them up, so maybe we can play for people who aren't familiar with you. Obviously, they can find you on YouTube, but sometimes I like to play these bits. And let's just start. Let's just play something. This is what I thought was interesting, that you're pretty unafraid to tackle subjects that most people they don't want to go near when they do stand up. So let's play a little bit here, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, which one do I want to do? Oh, let's go right to pro-life here. Here we go.
I'm just going to say it, okay? I'm going to say it. Nazis were bad. There you go. I said it. It's out there. I can't take it back, can I? Nazis were bad and they did horrible things. And one of the worst things they did was getting rid of the so-called unwanted, defective people who would have been a burden or deemed as a burden on the society, including unborn babies. I will be doing some jokes later. Don't worry about that. So all my life, I've been told that it was wrong, it was bad to get rid of unborn babies because they would have been a burden on the German Reich and its aspirations of world supremacy. But nowadays we are being told that it's good to get rid of unborn babies because they would be a burden on Karen from accounting and her aspirations of getting a promotion. I don't get that. If anything, Nazis made a better case. Bear with me on this one. Bear with me. The Nazis would go to this unborn baby, you got to die. But why? I tell you why. because all German-speaking folk must be reunited in one single ancestral fatherland. That's why, because the Versailles Treaty was a travesty. You don't know much about the Versailles Treaty, do you? We lost Danzig. We lost Danzig. Our territorial integrity has been interrupted. There are Germans now living under Poland, under Czechoslovakia. There are Germans living under Mussolini. Well, we kind of like Mussolini, but that's not the point. Das ist nicht der Punkt. We need to make this wrong right, and we cannot sustain the war effort if we were to take care of the likes of you. So you got to die, unless you can become a German soldier who can also speak English, because according to all future World War II movies, the Wehrmacht personnel talked English to each other. Otherwise, you got to die. Now, fast forward to our time, you tell the unborn baby, you got to die. Why? I tell you why. Because your mom needs to continue to do after work drinks and Peloton. Do you know?
Okay, now that, listen. Okay. Oh wait, I gotta stop it. I took it off. But... Okay, Nicholas. The thing that was interesting about it, you started off, and the audience was a little bit nervous, you know, and they didn't know what to do. But then when you got into what was probably the most controversial bit, when you're basically comparing modern abortion to Nazis, they were laughing along with you. Was this audience, you know, where did this audience come from? When did you do this show?
Yeah, this audience is a godsend. Together with the good people of Comedy Unleashed, which was the YouTube channel you were playing the video from. This is a very successful, my most successful video so far, my most successful set. On my own channel, it has been viewed more than 1 million times. And that was on Comedy Unleashed channel. Yes, that's right. I did this last year. I think it was shortly after Roe v. Wade controversy in the US. And of course, abortion is a big topic all over the West. And the good people of Comedy Unleashed are one of very, very, very few comedy clubs who still believe in true comedy, free speech, and free speech comedy. That's their motto. If it's funny, it's funny. So that's not a typical venue, and it's not a typical audience. And this is indeed one of very few clubs where I can get stage time with my kind of material and almost feel safe. I hate the expression safe space, which is used by wokes and liberals and the cancel culture warriors. But that's the reality. In London, doing that sort of material is virtually impossible. But thanks to these people, I can basically experiment. And of course, maybe the audience initially is a bit hesitant because not all of them know me.
Yeah.
Although some of them are regular, and of course the topic is quite sensitive and contentious. It's not intrinsically funny, and the premise maybe is a bit long. So I try to keep them, and I think on balance, and of course people can watch the whole routine. I did well, and the crowd were on board for such a controversial and delicate issue.
I'm also assuming it's Comedy Unleashed, this group, that
That's
they would have people. It's not necessarily that the audience agrees with you. I'm assuming it's not a totally conservative or religious audience or anything like that. I would assume with a group like Comedy Unleashed, they have, if it's for free speech, there's probably people with many differing views performing. Am I right?
That's right. That's right. I mean, they try to accommodate all different views. I'm not always happy about it because, you know, I'm like, lefties can have any other club and any major outlet anyway. But I don't run the club. So yeah, there are people who are regular and they're more open-minded, and they might have seen me before or the headliner of the night before, so they come to see that kind of comedy. But there are other people who don't know maybe about the ethos of this club. Some people who have just, you know, walked by because they saw the sign "Free Comedy Tonight." And indeed, I was heavily reprimanded by a couple of young ladies who were absolutely disgusted by my, attack on women's rights, or what they see as reproductive rights, or whatever, sugarcoating euphemism they used to call abortion. But in a big room, thankfully, you need enough critical mass or enough people who are on board and laughing and enjoying it for others to at least be interested. And thankfully, I wasn't heckled. And one reason why I was a bit nervous was that I didn't know which way. This was only the second time I was doing this set. The first time I did this again with the Comedy Unleashed, but in a different city in England, in Reading. It went well, so I tried it to. I decided to try it in the main venue.
Yeah, and so let's go back and do your story, because I had an idea that you were Italian, but you were raised in Iran. I learned that because when I first saw the video, you opened with a kind of a joke about, you know, escaping Iran or being tortured in
Right.
Iran. Were you? Tell me about your story, because I don't know it. You got out of Iran, which means you basically escaped it, but not without some trouble. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't when we are talking about that part of the world. My story is not the most impressive or or dramatic, considering what other people have gone through or do go through. But I was born in Italy to Iranian parents because my father was a diplomat, and when I was at school age, basically he returned to Iran. So I did my high school in Iran and then managed to get back to Italy on my own. So basically, I've lived on both sides, and
And what year
maybe
was
that's
that? When
why
did you go to Iran?
it was in the 80s. So I said
Okay.
not the fancy pants Iran that we know nowadays, but was very 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 bad and very tough.
Yeah, because revolution, I'm thinking, is about 1979, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
So
So in
late
the 80s,
80s.
you're in the fresh. You are in the definitely the fresh part of the revolution. But you were the son of a diplomat. So were you going to a high school that was rather mixed and had other diplomats at it, or what?
It was a good high school, but it wasn't for diplomats. I mean, I managed to get in Iran. Going to a good high school and afterwards university is important because if you don't make the cut to go to university, and places are very limited
Yeah.
or were limited at that time, then you have to do a 2-year obligatory military service in the desert or on the battlefield if the war happens to be still going on. I mean, by the time I was at high school, the war against Iraq had ended, but war is always a possibility, and even if there's no war, you will always end up. It's a huge country. You end up doing 2 years military service in a desert. So it's very important to go to a good high school so that it prepares you for the university entrance exam. So you go to university and are exempt temporarily from the military service, which is what happened to me.
Wow. So why did your dad go there? I mean, our diplomats obviously were taken hostage, and then they came home in the early 80s, and so they weren't there. But your dad went in the 80s. What made him say, "Hey, let's pack up, let's go to Iran"? There, things.
I never forgave him for that. He was the only one of six brothers and sisters, six siblings. All of them went to the U.S. and became U.S. citizens eventually, except my dad. And I get it. He was a diplomat, a low-level diplomat. Young enough not to be purged, not to be sent to forced retirement. But yeah, he wanted to do that job. Unlike some of his colleagues, he didn't want to, get out of the foreign ministry and become a restaurant owner or a taxi driver or a carpet seller. And I get that. But of course, it was a bit rough for me, being abstracted or extracted from Italy and spending my high school years in a very difficult place. So yeah, that's gives me some of the material or um, angle to look at the situation in the West and Islam and identity and all that. I mean, it's not all that. Sometimes I talk about abortion and how bad it is, but that's also part of it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think there's a lot of people who, I don't know. You're obviously I don't know a lot of people like you. I don't know any Iranian Italians who've gone into stand up, but I do know a lot of people who kind of left Iran or who have they have a certain view of the Islamic Republic, and they became quite liberal. They almost went on the other side, and they are they are more socially liberal because they were exposed to such social conservatism in Iran.
Right.
But you're not that way. Was your conservatism, did it come from social conservatism, or did it come from free market stuff? Because you do talk a lot about free market policies and the promise of the West and Western culture and things like that. So what really formulated your conservative outlook, do you think?
I think comparing the two sides, and what you say is right. Thankfully, I also know Iranians or Iranian expats who are conservative like me, because any sane person does see that what wokeism and what liberalism in the negative, in the American sense of the term, is doing to our societies. So social conservatism is maybe came to me when I returned to the West, and I saw the West that I had for so long longed to return to, being dismantled and destroyed. Obviously, I lived in Italy, I spent a year in Germany, and I've been living in the UK for the past 13, 14 years. And of course, I follow the news in the US. And when you see what leftism and wokeism and globalism has been doing to family values, the structure of the society, atomizing people, turning them into consumers, the demographic replacement, the border situation. Well, this LGBT propaganda thing is a relatively new phenomenon. It wasn't my concern in early 2000s when I returned to Italy, but all of this cannot just there's no way I wouldn't see that social conservatism is the way. We need nation states, we need pride in national identity, we need religion, maybe not fervently or fervidly, but at least some guidance. So that's what has taken me here. But it is also sad that one of the worst tragedies or damages that a government, a regime like the Islamic Republic has done to many young people nowadays is that, as you were pointing out, they have fallen off the other side of the roof, if you will. They see abortion on demand, or lack of commitment when it comes to sex, polyamory, multiple sex partners, not having kids for women, especially well into their 30s or 40s. They see these as achievements, or as I'm not saying all of them, but yeah, they do see these as achievements to gain, to achieve, and to cherish. Just to stick it maybe to the Islamic Republic, or maybe because they've been prevented from. They're way behind Western feminists, basically, who lied to women and told them, yeah, you don't need men, and you don't need husbands, and you don't need to get kids. Just go and try to become a CEO or work in this stupid office job until you're 40, and you can be happy with your cat and your Peloton, which I mentioned there, and your nice apartment with a view. And then when you're 40, you realize, oh, maybe I'm not happy, and maybe I should seek fertility treatment, maybe to find a kid, to have a kid, maybe. So, well, sadly, many Middle Eastern women, like in Iran, they haven't gone through, so they are not immune to the toxic new wave of feminism. So that's that too. But when it comes to me, yeah, I am for free market, and also for traditional conservative values.
And so you said you were in England for almost 15 years. Is that right?
Yes, that's I came here in 2009.
And what'd you do for the first decade What was
I
your
was
work
I
you were
was
doing?
working as a journalist for the BBC, for BBC World Service.
Oh, wow. So you've
Yeah,
seen it. You've seen the media business from that side. And I do know
yeah.
GB News. I have the app, and I keep up with it on I have a little radio app. So sometimes I listen into the shows and things like that. Vaguely aware of some of what's going on with GB News because I hear some of the personalities, and I've seen videos. I know I was vaguely aware of the Lawrence Fox thing that went on there. I've kind of follow him on Twitter. And so there
Hmm.
does seem to be a kind of, what they call here in the States, there's a lot of that red pill world. You have people online that are not necessarily conservative. They might be kind of Joe Rogan listeners, but they're kind of waking up to the fact that there's a problem with the establishment and the way that the world is run, and in the media. And I think there's that going on in England as well. I mentioned guys like Lawrence Fox. You got the GB News that's part of the movement there, I think. You got guys like Russell Brand who are very big. So would you say you're kind of part of that scene?
I mean, obviously, emotionally and ideologically, I feel very much at home here, and that's the reason why I left the BBC. Primarily because they saw my stand-up and they said this undermines our good reputation of impartiality, because they were under the impression that they were impartial.
Is it like
Because
NPR? I
BBC.
mean, I still listen to the BBC World Service sometimes because late at night they have a way of news reading that is kind of somnambulant. It kind of puts me to sleep, and I can I do like to keep up on European news. That's one of the bad things about U.S. media is not just that they're left wing, but they ignore most of the world. So I will listen to BBC World Service to just get a take on, sometimes I don't want to hear a right wing opinion. I just want to hear some newsreader going over, the kind of news that people in England might be hearing on a daily basis. And it also kind of puts me to sleep. But would you say that BBC is the equivalent of NPR here?
Yeah, yeah, possibly worse, but it's a tough race. We just I'm sure you followed the story of the person who just became the head of NPR, right? And
Yeah,
her background and
unbelievable.
her so that's that. And this was again another loss for me, or another disappointment of my life, because I had this infatuation with the BBC, because I used to be a teenager in the Islamic Republic of Iran, listening to the radio with all the noise, jammed by the regime, trying to listen to the BBC or the Voice of America or Radio Israel, whatever, or whoever who could give me some free information. So for us, it was like this beacon of freedom and Western values. And then I come to the West and I see, yeah, well, another institution captured ideologically by the left, still pretending to be impartial, but anything but. And I worked for them full time, 12, 13 years, 40, 50 hours. I was breathing in the same corridors and going to their meeting, and I was like, no, this is not the BBC. And I was put under disciplinary procedure because I said this report you've made about Donald Trump is not impartial for all these reasons. And they
Yeah.
said, no, by saying it's not impartial, you have jeopardized our impartiality. I said, okay, that's one way to look at it. So there was all that. Obviously,
What year was that?
culturally.
When did you write that? When did you make that report?
Well, it was before the 2020, shortly before the 2020 elections. It was a report about the U.S. border with Mexico in Arizona, and it was a horrible report under so many levels. And I just told them, just by mathematics, if you have a report and the number of minutes in which the pro-Trump person speaks and the number of minutes in which the anti-Trump people speak. Never mind that the reporter himself is being anti-Trump. But in Italy, we say mathematics is not an opinion, right? Just look at the number of time given to these people. It's not balanced. Never mind, they were showing cages in which kids would presumably be placed. Uh, Cages which started under the Democrats, by the way. But and then from that panning or cutting away to a ranch in Texas where they are separating calves from cows, calves from their mothers to be sent to Colorado or Oklahoma. And I was like, in what universe is this impartial reporting? And yeah, and I got a written warning for that, and I got a written warning for my comedy, and so I had to leave. So yeah, that's the landscape. There are a lot of similarities, as you can imagine, but it's a good accent to listen to, especially if you want to learn about Europe or sleep, sound sleep.
So you are hanging out at GB News, but you're not employed there. You're just kind of making appearances on the shows.
No, I'm not I'm not in the A team, as Lewis would say, Louis
Uh-huh.
Schaefer. But yeah, occasionally I make appearances here. I do a bunch of gigs. I'm a translator as my day job. Yeah, trying to make some comedy and basically fight the good fight in the culture war.
And any do you get out of England at all? Have you done any traveling in other parts of Europe?
No gigs in Europe. I have I find, well, the beauty of the internet and various platforms, including YouTube, or is that we can find each other. So the woke liberal lefty TV producers and promoters are no longer the exclusive gatekeepers to good comedy or to successful comedy. So I found a friend, a fellow comedian in Germany, who does comedy mostly in German. We are going to have a show in Berlin quite soon. A gentleman from Arizona actually invited me to a private gig 2 years ago. That was fun. I did a couple of open mics in Washington D.C. Obviously, very liberal environment, but funnily enough, my followers on YouTube also love those silences and awkward moments. So
Yeah.
there's something for everybody. And next month, I'm going to 21st of May. I'm going to Toronto, Canada. I haven't released the details on my YouTube channel yet, but at least there's going to be one show in Toronto. Maybe we can add an Ottawa date as well. But yeah, I'm looking forward to do gigs in North America as well. Obviously, because let's face it, most of my subscribers on my YouTube channel are from the US anyway.
Oh, they are?
Oh yeah, of
That's
course,
great.
because in terms of conservative values and in terms of just the population sheer numbers, there are more Americans who follow me than British people. They easily outnumber them.
What would you say I mean, this country is basically half. Half the country is conservative. So, obviously when you have an election, you could have 52% go for the Democrats, 52% go for the Republicans, but it's pretty much 50-50. And you got your red states, your blue states, but everyone knows where the divide is. And it's kind of half and half. But I get the sense that in England, your conservative movement is really in the minority, although, you guys got Brexit done. Am I right in thinking that it's not really 50-50 there, or is it just a little more fractured?
It's hard to tell. I mean, mind you, right now conservatives, or the so-called conservatives, it is called the Conservative Party. I'd call it anything but conservative.
Well, why?
Are
What is
ruling.
so you got the Conservative Party, you got the Tories, you got Labour, right? But you have a multi-party system. It's not as 50-50. Like here, you got two choices.
Conservatives and Tories. Yeah, I mean, here we have essentially two choices as well. Because, well, first of all, conservatives and Tories are the same thing.
Okay.
Tories is just their nickname. And then we have Labour. And these are the two major parties. Then we have Lib Dems, who sometimes play the kingmaker, but not recently, and they have been pretty much wiped out. And I don't mind that because they are, very pro-European, pro-EU. Not that I'm against Europe, but that's another story. But they
They're
are
anti-Brexit, though. Are they to the left of Labour, or is Labour to the left of the Lib Dems?
It's hard to say because, again, within Labour you have different spirits. You have hardline, more socialists. You have the so-called New Labour, who are maybe conservative light, and most of conservative light is essentially labor light. It's what you would call the rhinos in the U.S., and that's why
Yeah.
a lot of people like myself, like a lot of my friends, describe themselves as politically orphaned, because we have the two mainstream parties who look like each other very much, and in terms of stopping mass immigration, in terms of standing up to LGBT ideology, in terms of standing up to the so-called hate speech laws and cancel culture, they are pretty much the same. Now, conservatives have been in power for 13 years now, and they've been so disappointing that they are predicted to be, in for annihilation, basically,
Yeah.
later this year. But the
What
point is
happened
that
with
here,
Rishi is in there now, right? Rishi Sunak is
yeah,
he's the
Rich is in there now, but nobody's impressed. The boats. Well, you have the Mexican border. We have the boats. They keep coming. They haven't managed to kick them out. Inflation is still high, and yeah. So basically, uh, and that's what we call ourselves. We say we are small c conservatives because we don't want to be confused with the capital C conservatives, who is the Conservative Party, because we feel they are not really conservative. They're just conservative in name. Um, but the problem we have in the UK is that we have so many small constituencies. You have the Electoral College. We have so many small constituencies, and the system is called first past the post, which means in any small constituency, the first person wins, and you can even win with 30% of the vote. Okay, and then you get that seat in the parliament.
yeah.
So ultimately, smaller parties don't have a chance, because a party like UKIP in its heyday, United Kingdom Independence Party, who pushed and eventually made Brexit happen, at some point they had maybe 6 million votes, but because it's spread all over the country, in none of those single constituencies, they would win. So ironically, you had a party who managed to push for Brexit and who had seats in the Parliament of the European Union, but they didn't have even one member in the Parliament. So that's weird and disappointing for alternative forces to step up. And then instead of the Senate, we have the House of Lords, who are not elected. It's basically political cronyism. Most of them are appointed by the previous governments, and they are also left leaning. So when the House of Commons, who is elected by the people, pushes for example, containing mass immigration, the House of Lords starts throwing spanners in the wheels. And of course, we don't have the First Amendment either, so cancel culture is more dangerous here. So it's pretty bleak when you compare it to the U.S. And of course, we don't have a charismatic Trump to invest our hopes on.
Yeah,
So
for a
that's
while
that's
they kind of, because of the
where we are.
hair, they thought Boris was going to be like the British Trump, right? But he didn't deliver the goods, and I think conservatives soured on him, especially during COVID. I want to ask you
Yeah.
about COVID because I was it was the great disillusion of my life. I remember traveling in China years ago in 2007, and then again I think in 2009, and people had masks on, and I remember saying to the guy that was with me, well, that would never happen in the US, all these people with masks on their face, not even from a freedom standpoint, but just the idea that the inhuman that people would have a mask over their face as they traveled out and about in the world, I said it just would never happen in the US. So obviously during COVID, all of my impressions of what could possibly happen in the US were completely dashed. I thought we were a freedom loving nation. It turns out we are not. And I'm wondering what you thought of what happened in Great Britain, because Great Britain, because of the what we think of the bombing of London during World War II, and the stiff upper lip, and the "we will never surrender," and that slogan. What's the one that you see in British cafes? Uh, Carry on, right?
Keep
What is it?
keep keep calm and carry on.
Keep calm and carry on is what I thought, England lived by. But obviously during COVID, it was not keep calm and carry on. It was hysteria. It was worse than the United States. So did that shatter your belief in, the British stiff upper lip and the keep calm and carry on?
Yeah, of course. It just goes to show you how easily a nation can be broken, a nation can be indoctrinated, a nation can be brainwashed from schools when they ideologically capture all the institutions. Keep calm and carry on. Recently, because of the whole Russia-Ukraine war, many European countries, a high-ranking intelligence chief in the UK said maybe we need to bring back conscription, and he was derided, and nobody had any appetite for it. And of course, young people, white men, and rightly so, were saying, "Oh, all of a sudden now you think about us after demonizing us, after demonizing men, after demonizing white people, national identity, desecrating our flags, talking about toxic masculinity, white guilt, white privilege. Why would I go die for infinite sodomy and Africanization? I mean, I'm not, all of a sudden the country is mine. I should go die for it. You know, so that's that. And we've all heard and had heard these hypothetical conversations, right? If I lived under the Nazis, I would have defended the Jews. I would have stood up to them. And then we saw people who couldn't say no to a silly mask in the supermarkets, right?
Yeah.
And all freedoms and rights that we took for granted were taken away from us quite fast, and when most people didn't say anything about it, they turned against each other. They started, snitching each other to the police, blaming each other. And then what is even worse is that now that our overlords have tried this, they would apply the same, because it has already been done. They can do it in other areas at other times. Who knows what other pandemic, real or invented, might come in, because once you taste the taste of control, you wouldn't let it go. And of course, we know the whole green agenda, among so many other agendas, huh? No more air travel, only athletes and politicians. We have 15-minute cities being piloted, being rolled on in England right now. Stay within your 15-minute radius to help the planet. So don't travel, don't have friends on the other side of the river. Just stay there, shop there, entertain yourself, and so on. So it was pretty bleak. And of course, there were better cases and there were worse cases. New Zealand, Australia, Sweden did it differently. And I just want to say, to be fair to Boris Johnson, maybe he thought he was doing the right thing. It was unprecedented. And I have no doubt that if Labour were in power, they would have made it even more strict. So you could see maybe people like Boris were uncomfortable with it.
Listen, even Trump was a great disappointment to me, in that he had pretty good instincts, and he's kind of come around a little bit, but he was pretty bad. He folded. He got rolled over, Trump. But Boris rolled over, and it seemed like 24 hours. Boris was better than Trump at first, and he was not going to fall for any of it. And then I think he got a cold, or he got a bad cough. He got COVID, and he freaked out. Are you with me on that? Did he kind of cave overnight?
Well, I'm not sure if it was overnight, but they received pretty bad advice from the scientists, or so-called scientists, and these, they're like U.S. election pollsters. All their models were wrong and catastrophic, and maybe to get attention, or because obviously, and some of them openly said that. They said, well, we disregard normal scenarios. We only go for Armageddon, scenarios. And of course, no politician, and that's a weak point of democracy. No politician wants to see a lot of coffins, being rolled out under their watch. And in Italy, it was pretty bad, and the military was, moving these coffins from church to places, and when these images came on people's TV, I think our politicians also panicked.
Yeah.
And again, in democracy, you have short electoral circles, and nobody has the guts nowadays to say, "Okay, I make the tough call and the tough decision, no matter what," because they don't want their own head to be rolling in a year or so when there's an election.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what happened. I mean, I can count the number of politicians in the U.S., Thomas Massey was probably the best, and Rand Paul, the guys who generally on the libertarian side, they were pretty good. They didn't panic, but almost everybody else did. And Trump, again, like I said, he had good instincts. He brought in some very interesting people. Eventually, he brought Dr. Atlas into the White House, and he resisted a lot of the foolishness. But he didn't fire Fauci. He went whole hog on that stupid vaccine, and because he wanted to play the hero. So even somebody like Trump, he got rolled by this whole thing. I don't think we're going to get rolled again. I think in the US, they would never get away with that. Pretty much the red part of the country would never fall for that COVID nonsense again. But I get the sense in England, you didn't have that unified. It wasn't 50-50. I think the people who didn't panic are in the extreme minority in England. Am I right?
Possibly. Obviously, here there is a lot of reflection, about that as well. How good these vaccines were. We have inexplicable death of young people and athletes who suddenly drop to the ground. And when you look back, and of course, we are still dealing with the inflation and the extreme toll it took on small businesses, never mind pubs and restaurants, but also depression, a whole generation of kids who are said to have speech impediment because they had to wear masks or they had to sit at home. A lot of people live in small apartments. They weren't used to living in these small apartments for so many hours a day with a kid, with more kids, working from home. A lot of marriages and partnerships collapsed. Domestic violence, depression, and alcoholism for people who saw their livelihood, their business that they have put together in a lifetime suddenly go broke, and all that. So I think we still don't know half of the whole negative, devastating fallout of the whole craze. But yeah, again, in the US, you have the First Amendment. You are more open, less regulated when it comes to media outlets. That probably helps.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, we're going to leave it here now. I've got a couple of things I got to do, and you got to get to your. I think you're doing some hits on GB. But let's keep in touch, and definitely let me know when you're in the States, because I think it'd be fun to do a show with you in New York. We've got shows at Fox. It'd be great to see if you're around, or do another podcast.
Absolutely, with pleasure, Tom. Thanks very much for having me, and I'll be looking forward to it.
That's great, and I'll be in touch. This is great. Thanks a lot.
Likewise. Thank you. Take care.
Say hi to Louis Schaefer for me.
Absolutely.